so can I just put myself on a standby status?
So Fletcher, you're on standby if required. So Councillor Watson, yours was on the sale or lease?
Yes, yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wonder if I could seek a little clarification in light of point 30 there, where the sale of the freehold interest in QE2 Square is now considered the most appropriate option. And the clarification I just really seek as to what process is now followed. The negotiation's obviously ongoing. At the time that we voted on this, figures such as $60 million were getting bandied around for essentially the most expensive real estate in Auckland. Some of the comments we've heard today would suggest that the figure may or may not be anywhere near that. At the moment, as a councillor, I feel slightly in a position where, like someone who's said they're going to sell their house, you don't know how much you're going to get for your house, maybe if anything. Is there any allowance in the process for approval from here on in to be based on the final sum that is determined? Because it seems to me, and I'm sure the public would feel the same way, that we're in the rather unfortunate position of being quite uncertain as to how much we're going to get for this land, where everything was prefaced on it being a windfall that would then be reinvested in any number of areas. So my question is therefore, what is the process from here on in terms of approval or not on the basis of what comes out of these negotiations?
Councillor, just to clarify, we've asked for a report to come to the next meeting, because the last thing we need for Aucklanders and for good decision making is for figures to be bandied backwards and forwards in the public domain.
I guess
so it's at the next meeting we will make
fine.
that decision.
So my question is a very simple one, is when that figure comes to be bandied around, are we going to be in a position to make a deliberation on the basis of that figure?
Well, Madam Chair, firstly we should all recognise that the extraordinary large sums that the Herald attributed to the value of the site bear no relationship to the market value, and and I've had that discussion with the journalist. But so we
Who's
have
sitting behind you. We point
hello,
out.
hello Bernard. So as with a lot of property transactions, the commercial terms have been worked through by the ACPL board. We have market value. I mean, if we were in confidence, I could tell you where we're at. But I mean, it's probably not appropriate to do in this meeting. I think at an earlier meeting, I gave you an indication of the band in which we thought it would take place, and we've probably done better than that. So. I think there's, in terms of the valuation evidence, I think we've achieved a very good price for the sale of the land. So I think that's, and I'm very happy to share that with you. But the normal process is, the process chain for decision making normally is through that delegation through to ACPL and the AT boards in this matter. So
Does that mean it's not going to actually come back to the council for approval in terms of whether we think it's a reasonable price?
correct.
There you go. Buy something without knowing how much you're going to get for it.
Ridiculous.
Okay. Councillor Walker.
Sure. I'm looking at some of these paragraphs through 22 to 28, and my question goes to whether or not it's appropriate to sell or lease. I'm making the assumption that the developments that we're talking about, certainly in terms of transport and enhancement of the area that we're talking about here, are going to take place, for example, light rail and so on. And I don't doubt that the value of this land and this location is going to go up immensely, and its strategic value and its strategic importance in terms of its location will also go up. So why wouldn't we hold on to it? Why wouldn't we not sell it and lease it? Why wouldn't we go into an arrangement where we get an enhanced value in terms of leasehold over time? And I can appreciate that precinct properties may not be interested in that, but we're meant to be acting in the best interests of our shareholders, and our shareholders are the public of Auckland.
Here, here. Here, here.
And it's their space that we're talking about here, not precinct space at this point in time. And in 100 years, we might actually need that bit of land back. In hindsight, in consideration of what we heard this morning about ports, and frankly, mistakes, significant mistakes, I'd suggest of a very high order that we've made in flogging off public space down there, which is why we're in the fix today, we wouldn't have made some of those decisions in hindsight. And here we are today, and we're flogging off another piece of space. Frankly, and once we've done that, it's gone. It's kind of like a reclamation. It's permanent. So I've got a question about the economics and the longer term economics, and my question also goes to the strategic nature of the space and the desirability of council having ongoing ownership of that space. And I also say to you, in many other locations where the city rail link is going, we're putting a tunnel under private space above. We may be purchasing that space or coming to some arrangement with it, but we're doing deals, frankly, that are not much unlike what we're talking about with this space. So what's the difference?
Well, I think just picking at the last point, what I think is typically happening along the CRL route is what we're proposing here, that the AT own the tunnels, and above the tunnels there is privately owned development. The site itself, whilst it's located quite close to the water, is a very constrained development site. So if we weren't dealing with this with precinct, remember we've got rail tunnels through underneath most of the site, so it's very difficult to develop any basements or foundations. You have to allow access. It's currently road, allow access to the downtown shopping centre as it exists. And if Lower Queen Street is pedestrianised, the site has no vehicle access. So it's actually a very constrained site. I think all the previous thinking, all the previous reports to you and the reports from Tim and his team have indicated that we get the best city development outcome if it's developed comprehensively as part of the rest of the block. And I think in terms of the council's city development aspirations to build a strong, attractive waterfront and incorporating that small piece of space in a more comprehensive development. I mean, you've had the reports on that, the presentations on that, and that was the overwhelming, I think, line of the argument. So then, having got to the point, which not everyone may still agree with, that it's better to incorporate that space in a bigger development, it also, for the sake of the ongoing management and redevelopment of that space, it makes sense for one slither of it not to be on a leasehold basis and for it all to be on a freehold basis. And then the financial arguments also suggest that we're better off selling it freehold now rather than putting in a ground lease and with all the problems of then managing that lease in the future.
Okay, I have
Councillor,
a related question,
yes,
very short.
And I will let you ask it. I'm just going to put a little bit of order into this because we are getting very, very wide-reaching and far-reaching in our questions. This is just question time.
Correct.
Just reminding councillors, whether we like it or not, we have made the decision on this piece of land, and the decision is to dispose. So we're not going to relitigate that decision today. That decision has been made. You asked the staff to come back and give us advice on leasehold or freehold. I'd like you to contain yourselves to that discussion, otherwise we might have to evoke standing orders, which we didn't like last time when Councillor Wood, bless his heart, had a damn good attempt at doing that. So just let's stick to questions and make sure that they're brief. Councillor Walker, back to you.
Well, my understanding is sale or lease, and that does not necessarily mean disposal. That's my understanding, but correct me if I'm wrong. The related question I ask is, given that the precinct development is of huge interest, part of it covers an area that was, I think, Little Queen Street, that ran across. Is council in a better position to negotiate a development that's more in the public interest if it retains interest in part of the land, and in this instance, QE2 Square, than if we dispose of it outright?
I think probably Tim Watts is the right person to
Yeah.
advise you on that rather than me.
So I'm going to ask Tim can he just join the foursome up here, because we were hoping to get Tim to talk us through the report that discusses the merits of the line that's been set for disposal for QE2 Square. Tim, just a very, actually Councillor Walker, let's hold that question, because I'll get Tim to answer that in the body of his wider presentation that we thought we were going to do next. Let's stick with the quick discussions on leasehold, freehold. Councillor Darby, you're next.
Thank you. Just want to get it clear. At the outset, staff were saying there are no decisions required on this report. That does not preclude us from making decisions on any matter contained within the report, assuming that we're not revoking previous decisions. And I want to be clear, the resolutions from a prior meeting of ADC were there was a vote, though I did not support it and others did not support it, for the disposal of, I think it was QE Square in full or part, or up to 1,800 square metres. It was up to. Is that correct? Can anybody just remind us of those resolutions?
Madam Chair, the physical extent of land to be sold wasn't defined at that meeting. However, the area in question is some 2,000 square metres.
Some 2,000. So just something that concerns me there, quote from Mr. Fuhr, we've done better than that. Am I hearing that negotiations have already concluded before we make these decisions about the extent or the method of possible disposal, lease or sale?
Chair, we've been in discussions with Precinct for some 2 years on this, and probably detailed negotiations around a lot of complex issues for the last 10 months. So, and on the way, there's been various points secured in the negotiations which have been reported through to the boards. So there is no agreement until there's a signed agreement, but there's certainly positions secured such that I was able to make the comment I made.
So, and I'll just go back to the resolution G that we're referring to, Chair. So today we're considering, though there is a highlight of sale and lease options there, we are also dealing with officer feedback on public evaluation options. To date, there has been no public opportunity to provide feedback on the decisions of disposal, and so that was placed there to provide officers with the opportunity to advise us on what the public evaluation options are. After we finish sale and lease, I would assume that we're going to canvass that one, but now I'll go to sale and lease, and I do note, and I just want this confirmed, that Precinct Properties are prepared to prepay the leasehold, not dissimilar to what's happening on Wynyard. Is that correct?
That is not what they. If that was the only option, they would go away and consider that and confirm whether they wish to proceed or not.
It does say at 26. It would have to by way of prepaid leasehold interest.
So just to clarify,
I want that clarified. Yes,
if the issue, if it was a regular, if it was like the Scene Apartments lease or something where there's a regular 5-year rent review, they would have absolutely no interest in participating on a leasehold basis. If it was a terminating lease, and Precinct are a party to such an arrangement with Waterfront Auckland, then we've we've negotiated enough to know there'd be a significant discount from the freehold value to go down that path, and precinct, if we were go to finalise the negotiation on that basis, may still withdraw from such a negotiation.
Okay.
So just tell
I
me,
think
why
Councillor
is
Darby-
the Wynyard land, why did the council enter into leasehold on the Wynyard land? What was its interest in not freeholding the land?
Okay, I'm just going to call a halt there. We'll get the answer to that question. My suggestion from the chair is that we've got two separate discussions kind of happening in parallel. I'm aware that we have a very large piece of work being done on a very large piece of property negotiation, and Councillor Walker said quite correctly that we are to act in the best interests of Auckland ratepayers. In doing that, I think conducting in public some of the debate around how this process will be conducted is not perhaps in the best interests of our negotiators. So I'm going to, my briefing on this, as was Councillor Darby's, is that this was our opportunity to receive information on the sale or lease or direct sale. That was the extent of the discussion. I've asked for a report back to the next meeting on the progress of this and in the right context, so we can actually drill right down into the detail, and we can do so without prejudicing negotiations that are underway, because although there's a lot of political interest in this, our fiduciary duty needs to be discharged as well, councillors, as well as our legal duty. So I think I'm cautioning everyone to just breathe for a moment.
So just clarification there.
Councillor, I'd like to just finish. So let's just be really clear. The details that some of you are asking for will be available to us next month, and that will be the right time to have that discussion. Councillor Darby.
So it's at that point, at the next meeting, this committee will give direction by way of resolution on sale or lease, and it will also give direction on the extent of the eastern boundary. Is that correct?
I'll just seek some advice on that.
Well, Madam Chair, officers are on the understanding that you've made a decision to dispose, and you asked us to come back and advise you on the question around freehold or leasehold. Clive has come back and advised you that our professional advice is that freehold is the best approach to be taken. So our understanding is that does not require a decision from this committee.
But it does not preclude a decision from this committee.
And I think that's why the report next month, with a little bit more opportunity, rather than as part of an omnibus report as this is, with a little bit more opportunity to focus clearly on our legal responsibilities, our financial responsibilities and previous decisions made, I think we can actually achieve a much better process for decision making.
I don't want to prolong this, Madam Chair, but of course it's of great interest to Aucklanders. So, just in summary, because I don't see the point in drilling down into parts of this report, particularly under sale and lease, and the other section being the extent of the eastern boundary, because we're going to be dealing that with in detail at the next meeting, and at that time we can resolve accordingly. Is that correct?
My hope was, because we are going to try and do as much of this as we possibly can in the public eye, that in the public interest they'd be interested in hearing from Tim Watts on the report back on the extent issue, or I thought that we could deal with today. It may be relevant at the next meeting.
That's problematic, because that Mr. Watts's study is a very lengthy study which I've been privy to as of yesterday, and it's complex, and I don't think we're not going to do it the light over easy right now. My concern is this is very backward looking, substantiating decisions, so I don't want to continue that process. So it needs to be clear. Either we do it the light over easy way, or we hold off and take it next time and dig down into it on that and the lease sale options. Which is it going to be?
Yeah, I'm really comfortable that we clump those two issues together and we deal with them in the more detailed report. It seems to me that we've got the time to do that, and we may have a much more rational discussion by doing so. I can see some discussion, we'll just check.
Madam Chair, Clive might just like to advise you on that.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the So AT and ACPL have been progressing on the basis that there were, in conjunction with the Chief Executive of Auckland Council, that there were delegations in place to conclude the development agreement. And we are within days of concluding the development agreement. So, but however, I mean, certainly as part of the reporting to the boards, there's been a full analysis of, if you like, a business case that analyses the transaction in detail, and if it meets your needs to have that full report at the next meeting that sets out all of the nature of the transactions, then that can be done. But certainly in the path we're heading, that probably sometime by the end of next week, the actual development agreement could be in place.
Okay, that's why I was reminding
Dale.
elected members that decision has been made, the disposal decision has been made. So in the interests of that, it may be appropriate to ask Tim, when we get to his bit, to do the explanation of whether the line has been set and the justification for that. So I've now got Councillor Clow, Wood, Cooper, Webster, Lee, Councillor Fletcher on standby, and Member Ngamani for another issue. Councillor Clow,
Mine's another issue.
yours is another issue. Councillor Wood.
Mine's another issue too.
Okay, Cooper.
Mine too.
Lee.
Madam Chair, I'm just a little bit concerned in terms of the decision-making process by this governing body in terms of the Local Government Act. And what I'm worried about is that by supporting the recommendation, the council in effect passively endorses the sale of this prime piece of land, strategic piece of land, for all time to an overseas entity without any price at all. And I know the Auditor General is pretty busy right now, but the thing is, we could be very, very vulnerable in endorsing this sort of decision-making process. So I make a plea, and I haven't heard you agree or not agree exactly, that before any final decision is made to sell this land, or indeed to lease it, that we get a proper cost-benefit analysis, and also can we please have a price that we're meant to be selling public land for before any decision is made. That's my plea.
Councillor, I'm going to ask we all seem to be endeavouring to explain where we are at in the process. We're going to have another crack, remembering the decision to dispose of this piece of land has already been made. We then delegated the negotiations to ACPL and AT. That process has been ongoing. We asked to have reported back how the line and the extent has been set. That's what we've asked Tim Watts to come back to us for, and the decision and discussion on the price is not appropriate to have in this.
Yes or no,
open forum.
please, Madam Chair.
So, Mr. Tsee.
Madam Chair, we understand the delegations are in place for the Chief Executive of the Auckland Council, the Board of ACPL and the Board of Auckland Transport. You've made those decisions, and those matters are delegated to those three parties to conclude. You asked us to explain whether there was what were the benefits of leasehold versus freehold. You've had that expert advice that we are better to enter into a freehold sale arrangement for this particular piece of land. And we are part way through a negotiation which, as the Chair has pointed out, it's never a good idea for us to try and conduct a commercial property transaction at a public meeting. So you've already delegated those decisions to other parties to make, and those three parties have to satisfy themselves on your behalf that the best and fairest value is achieved for the package of transactions that is going to occur. I think, Madam Chair, we've been really clear about that. Some members clearly don't agree with or like that process, but that is the process that has been agreed.
Indeed, thank you. It could not be more clear. Councillor, so let's just check. I think at this stage it's appropriate for us to ask Tim Watts to just go through the report that he's prepared to present on the extent of the QE2 line.